Welcome to the Sterile Room. This is a podcast geared toward all general surgery residents to discuss topics ranging from choosing a fellowship, performing a COCA maneuver, and to managing one's expectations during a grueling 5 years of residency. The goal of this podcast is to provide listeners with another line of education, but also, and more importantly, to discuss topics that are deemed taboo and hopefully sterilizing them. Thank you for tuning in. Hey guys, welcome back to the Sterile Room. We have a pretty good topic, I think, today to discuss. I actually have an awesome guest. I have one of my former chiefs here that is so gracious, spared some of his time from fellowship to help us kind of discuss this topic. And what we're going to sort of get into is navigating the fellowship portal and really just applying. And yeah, sure, that's a pretty self-explanatory thing if we've all applied to residency, but I think for those of you that are out there that come from maybe not a big academic center, maybe somewhere like a small community-based program where you don't get a research year, et cetera, and a lot of exposure, I think this will be probably a good episode for you to listen to. And we appreciate any comments that you guys have, and just feel free to reach out afterwards. But let me get back to our special guest and introduce. This is Dr. Ryan Huttinger. Obviously graduated from our residency program and is currently finishing up his thoracic fellowship. He's in his second year. Ryan, welcome. Such an honor to have you back here.
Well, thanks for having me on, Paul. Obviously, this is a great honor both to be with you, but also very apropos given your recent match success as well. So congratulations to you on your surgical critical care match.
Let's not stroke each other's egos here, Ryan, but you know what? I always loved your love for vocabulary words there. But yeah, I actually have a nice set of topics that we can go through. I think the first bullet point I want to go into is really choosing a fellowship, right? You got to know what you want to go into. Everybody kind of thinks they want to go and do something, and it changes. They have an experience that does that. I mean, just to be, give you some anecdotal evidence on myself. I initially, for some of you may laugh, I wanted to do breast oncology because I did a lot of those, mastectomies early on in my junior years of residency. But as I became more senior, got more involved in other cases, I soon learned that, I love the acute care model, love trauma, and I love taking care of the sickest patients in the hospital. So then obviously that geared me towards surgical critical care. Ryan, what made you choose your fellowship in thoracic, and do you always want to do that?
Yeah, that's a great question because, I think much like you, I initially came in thinking I was going to do trauma. And then I kind of thought maybe hepatobiliary is pretty nice. And then you kind of, life finds a way, unfortunately, whether fortunate or unfortunate, I should say. For my first experience in cardiac surgery when I was an intern, I thought it was probably one of the most daunting topics, one of the toughest surgeries, and I thought there was no way I'd ever be able to surmount enough knowledge to be able to either match or even perform those surgeries. As you go on, I met a mentor who allowed me to come into the OR with him, really fostered a great relationship and allowed me to really, explore my operative skills in cardiac surgery. And that's what really led me to wanting to do cardiothoracic surgery. I definitely thought that for sure there was no way I was doing cardiothoracic surgery, and then I found out how abysmal the match rates were, and I thought even further that there was absolutely no way I'd do cardiothoracic surgery just simply because of that. With that said, I think that, life has a way of intersection of preparation and luck. So I think that, the specialty you go into in part chooses you and in part you choose it, right? Now, whether that's based on lifestyle, your current family dynamic, what you want your practice style to be, what you want your practice setting to be, all those things play into it. But I think for every, person, it's going to be individualized. For me, I find cardiac surgery to be extremely technically challenging. The management of those patients is very challenging. Every day I'm challenged by the field itself, and I'm forced to get better every single day. Now, most people would say, maybe they'd say that about trauma or another surgery. But again, it's just really what your passion is, where you find happiness. I can absolutely do, let's just say a GME 80 hours a week, doing cardiac surgery, no doubt, right? When I was on general surgery and, maybe even some of the lighter months, I found myself getting a little bit bored. So I found that time just dragged by. I was starting to get a little burnout. But now, I found a specialty that I really enjoy, and I don't mind working hard. And I think that's something you have to find and delineate for yourself. No,
well said. And anytime you use a Jurassic Park quote, I am definitely excited about that, right?
That's right.
Jokes aside, Yeah, I mean, you hit the nail on the head, and I think that's definitely what you got to do first. What's your interest, right? What really gets you up, excited in the middle of the night, and when you're on call. If you're going to be the cranky surgeon that gets called in, and you're not very empathetic to your consultant, then it's going to be a hard career for you. Ryan found being galvanized by thoracic and cardiothoracic surgery. That's how I feel about trauma, acute care surgery. Like you said, it's what lifestyle you like. Shift work. It's a paradigm shift from the old school surgeon of being perpetually on call 24/7, especially if you want to be a decent father or a wife or whoever, a spouse. If you want to have a family and have time for that, that's going to take into account your specialty choice. And then another thing, like you said, Ryan had great mentorship, and then same with me. Like, you have to have mentors that are enthusiastic about their jobs, that will show you the ropes, literally give you the sticks. That input fosters that growth and that interest. So I think it's always, like Ryan said, it's individualized. You have to also be realistic. Pediatric surgery, pretty tough place to go from here. Not to say it can't be done, but you have to be realistic in your choices. But Ryan did an excellent job matching cardiothoracic, and I think his year was actually one of the most competitive years of date. So it's not impossible, but versus me for surgical crit, I will say it's a little bit easier in terms of the match rate. That's aside, but I think that's pretty good. Yeah, Ryan.
One plug I'd put in there, just kind of as we move into our next topic, is that part of it is really being honest with yourself, right? Do you really love the field? Do you really love the lifestyle that it affords? Do you love the mentors in that field? Do you have a mentor? Is your mentor honest with you, right? Mm-hmm. I think that one of the things in today's kind of world is the mentorship. If somebody shows an interest in you, you definitely need to hold on to that. You need to reciprocate it. You need to be with them. Like, if they're willing to let you do things and really take you under their wing, everybody's busy. So if they're showing any interest, definitely stick with that person. Try to meet with them. Try to get them to, especially if they're in the field that you want to go into, right? They're going to have an insight into applying, into how can I sharpen my CV? How can I, is research more important, or is it leadership experience? Is it, some other extracurricular activity? And I think that a lot of that comes from being honest with yourself, right? If you're, are board scores the most important thing for the application, or are they, just more of a checkbox? So I think all that really plays into it.
Yeah, no, perfect segue. How do you make yourself competitive on paper? If you don't have a research year and you're not coming from a big household name, if you have mentors in it, what did they do, to make themselves a candidate? A lot of times, it's really that relationship and going to these conferences if you can. I think somebody making a call for you is sometimes bigger than, what you got in your app site percentile, or if you have 5-10 publications. I know that helped me a lot where I matched currently. I worked closely with one of my mentors, and he had a great connect with one of the current PDs. A lot of times if they can make a call for you and especially give a very positive feedback, that goes tremendous in terms of your chances of matching at that program. Ryan, what did you do? Cardiothoracic is a pretty tough to get into. What did you do beef up your CV?
Yeah, I would say I'm probably an interesting candidate from a CT perspective, right? I think a lot of those other applicants have done maybe 1, maybe 2, maybe 3 research years. I think what I really lacked in research, I made up for clinically, right? I had a great experience in the OR. I was able to speak on those experiences in the OR. So that was kind of part of it. The other part was, for me, I knew that research on an application is essential for any fellowship you're going to look at. So, but yeah, I think that research, is in times a checkbox, right? So, it's not necessarily that you're doing the hardest hitting impact papers that are going to be practice changing, right? You don't have to come from, the centers that are doing the most avant-garde, tip of the spear type of research or new devices or technology. Doing case reports. And the way I use it is I either say nickel and diming or just hitting singles, right? So, we're all familiar with the Oakland A's and Billy Beane, right? So you hit singles and that gets runs, right? So you don't have to hit a home run every single time. I did a lot of small case reports, presented at a lot of conferences. Basically, any conference would accept me. I tried to present something, even if it was silly. Even if I thought, wow, this doesn't really pertain to cardiac surgery. I presented a lot of general surgery cases. We had a lot of interesting pathology. So just showing and doing that. I did also carry over some research that I had from medical school and even undergraduate as well. So that definitely did help me. Another way that I really bolstered my application aside from research was leadership experience, right? So getting involved in the administrative side of my hospital, not outside of just the residency itself, but getting on committees, being a resident, they're always looking for residents on committees at every single hospital, right? They want to show that they have residents that are involved. And I think that you actually can get those experiences, and that will also pad your CV. And you also get a gainful experience out of that too. It's not just something you're doing to check a box, hopefully, but it's twofold benefit, right? So you benefit, you learn how hospitals run, and you get an intricate knowledge of how things run, but additionally, it also looks better on a CV. So, aside from research, other extracurricular activities like that. And, I did do a little bit of volunteer experience, not as much as I would have liked, but, we're all very busy in residency. So nobody's really has that much, unfortunately, free time.
All pearls here. I think it's, what's the term? Low-hanging fruit. And like Ryan said, you don't have to, it doesn't have to be published in JAMA, it doesn't have to go to New England Journal, it can just be anywhere. Very overzealous in terms of where you, and apply broad to where you submit your manuscripts in, and then just any publication is a publication. Other things that I did, and I actually started this in medical school, was offer to write and review chapters. I think I did that for Lippincotts. Like I remember one time, I think it was the 2016 or 2017 step up for USMLE, and I read something there about pathophysiology for the cardiology chapter, and it was wrong. Mm-hmm. And it was messing me up so much. I was like, because I've been, you were trying to study so hard for STEP, that I actually emailed the editor, and I was like, hey, this is incorrect. And I showed other sources, and they sent it to their chief editor, who verified that. And then they asked me, hey, do you want to review other chapters? And they gave me Amazon gift cards, and then they put me down in the contributors list on some of the books. And, from time to time, they still offer me that. And so that's another way, once again, to get any type of publication. That's also scholarly or academic activity. One of the bigger programs that I applied to for fellowship actually noted that. They're like, hey, I didn't even know you could do that. Mm-hmm. How did you get into that? And I told them my story, and they were pretty taken back by it, and they were actually impressed. So that's another way to get that CV bigger, make yourself look more lucrative on paper.
Now, one question I have for you, Paul, would you recommend that everybody start their own podcast? Or do you find that...
Well, actually, that's a great point, man. Funny enough, that was actually another talking point.
Yeah.
Almost every single interview I had asked me about this podcast, and you get inspired by certain people and certain individuals that make you want to do something that's unique. And I think having your own podcast, sure. I mean, obviously, I think I've told everybody the reason why I did this is just to have sort of a nice audio recording of my thoughts and cool occurrences during residency, and maybe something I can share with my kids one day. If it blossoms to something great, if it doesn't bother me. But I still think it's a fun activity, and it's bought me some interviews for sure, and then also, if not, just at least some good talking points during the interview, make yourself stand out. So yeah, start a podcast. That's what we're trying to say. Not very hard to do. Another thing is we kind of want to transition to now is sort of like the timeline, and Ryan's for thoracic, vascular, MIS, surgery, all the things, and then of course surgical critical care all have different timelines. So, definitely do your research and find out. It's just like you're applying to anything, medical school, residency, you want to start early. I'll go into Ryan, sort of delve into his, but real quick for mine, since it's just really fresh because I just matched. I started really developing everything a year beforehand, almost, I wouldn't say a year, but at least 8 to 6 months before any of the dates. And a lot of times for the exact dates change, but usually for surgical critical care, the window opens up in June, and then they start doing interviews sometime in June, July. The portal opens, and then obviously you match in August. Even then, the application portal, which is separate from NMRP, you can get into that, I think, starting in, February. So start uploading stuff, and when you feel confident and everything's done in there, submit it. And I even had people offering me interviews in April, even before then. So once again, they may say on the NMRP website, like, oh, there's the application cycle begins in June. That's wrong. You can actually start interviewing for programs even sooner than that. And once again, the sooner you do, the better. The more interviews you can get, increase your chances of match rate. This is sort of in between your PGY4 and obviously you match your 5th year. So that's different, I think, from Ryan's experience, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, I think the match cycle is ultimately important, especially in those programs where you have to apply in your 4th year. Because that means everything has to be pushed up a couple of years, right? I mean, you don't have many years before that to really bolster your CV, garner those letters of recommendation, gather all those requisites, right? So, I mean, all these things take a lot of time. It's better to be prepared early, right? So, like I said about mentors, if you start to get a good mentor who's really, giving you good feedback, giving you good advice, they've obviously taken to you. I think that's somebody you want to explore. Hey, would you be willing to write a letter for me, either in a year, in a 2 years, etc.
Yeah, and that's kind of like Ryan's already, as usual, premature shot there, but that was our next topic was the letters of recommendation.
Yeah,
but
you're not keeping that part in there.
Letters of recommendation, which is the next topic, I think, and we already touched on it. It's sort of, and you're seeing the trend here. It's sort of the same pony show that you've been doing for medical school, for even undergrad, and of course residency. Is the sooner you can get these, the better. But when it comes to the letter of rec, I feel like these matter quite a bit more than they did in residency and even medical school, because especially if you've got somebody that had done that fellowship before and still has connections to that fellowship, that letter is going to weigh supremely high. And I speak that from personal experience. That really helped me out because that was part of the talking points of my interview. It was like, hey, Dr. So-and-so, they wrote you a great letter. Puts all that validation. If they really like that individual that wrote your letter of recommendation, they know that you are a sound resident, you're going to be a great fellow, and then obviously you're going to contribute to the field in a positive way. It's huge. Mentors are another, I think, highlight.
I also think, sorry to cut you off, but to add, I think that especially, if you're coming from a program that maybe is a community program or maybe an otherwise, non-traditional powerhouse, let's just say, if you can do a rotation at either within the specialty you're trying to do at the hospital, maybe you'd want to match, going there, getting a letter, showing interest, right? Showing them that you're a person that they want to work with, right? That's all very helpful, and I think that can't be understated as well. I think a lot of times in any application, right, somebody that is known and somebody that they have experience with, that's going to go a long way. Because anybody reading any application, they can only gather so much information based off a stack of papers. Obviously, it goes into more interviewing and all that kind of stuff as well, but I think a lot of it is just, can I train somebody? Do I like being with them? Really goes a long way. So if you are from a program where you can maybe get an elective rotation, maybe go outside the four walls of your hospital, that is something you should definitely try to explore as well. Because I think it is usually pretty fruitful.
I'm glad you brought that up. But no, that's 100% correct. Just like how you guys did sub-Is and acting internships as fourth-year medical students at these different residencies that you wanted to go to. Obviously you can't do as many of those in residency, but as Ryan said, and if your program allows for it, 100% agree with this. Go and do a rotation. Obviously it's a double-edged sword. As you guys already know, you got to do exceptionally well. But I mean, at this point, you guys know that. I don't have to tell you. I think kind of next thing, Ryan, I want us to touch upon is just really now preparing for interviews. You've kind of done everything leading up to it. You got all your ducks in a row. You've gotten emails from these programs. How did you prepare for your interviews?
Obviously, one of the first kind of decision trees to prepare yourself for interviews is it going to be in person or virtual, right? So that makes a big difference, especially if you're going to virtually interview. So I think in preparing for interviews, there's several things that you kind of got to consider. Part of it is that you got to prepare for the venue that you're going to be in, right? Is it going to be an in-person interview? Is it going to be a virtual interview? Because both those things are very different. Although they are very similar in the way that they're conducted. They ask a lot of the same questions. It's just a different way. I can remember for my virtual interviews, which was new to me. So when I interviewed for residency, they were all in-person, pre-interview dinners, a lot of more social gatherings, stuff of that nature. And so when I went to do virtual fellowship interviews, it was a change, right? I think anytime you're preparing for interviews, you have to have an elevator pitch of yourself ready. I know nobody really likes to boast about their accomplishments or boast why they're great. For some people that comes naturally. For others, I think a lot of it is just preparing and a lot of introspection, right? So why should I take this person? You have to put yourself in the shoes of a program director and say, Why would I want to take someone like Paul, for instance? Go beyond the stack of papers, right? Go beyond who you are, why you're doing this, ways that you can show them your interest, unique hobbies, things like that, things that make you memorable, right? So all those things kind of go into your elevator pitch that's going to become critical, especially whether in person, virtual, etc. That's, I think, the first step of preparation. A lot of that comes, again, from introspection, self-reflection, in knowing who you are, what you're about, what you want to accomplish. And then the kind of second part of that is once you get those interviews, right, you need to be prepared for the places that you're going. I think a lot of times the one difference for fellowship interviews is that, especially coming out of general surgery, is they know at the end of your training you could be a general surgeon. You could go be a general surgeon, get a job, make a large salary or a nice sum. So they treat you a little bit differently than they did as when you were a fourth-year medical student. So they treat you more in an adult fashion. So it's a little less prove yourself to me, and it's more let's get to know you. But I still think it's critical to have that kind of elevator pitch of yourself ready.
Yeah, I agree. And make it smooth too. It's sort of like presenting a consult to an attending. Just like they don't want to hear about the entire past medical history of hypothyroidism and all their OBGYN surgeries and all this stuff. You streamline it. I think I had mine down to about a minute and a half, 2 minutes. And then if they found something interesting, obviously they would ask a question and elaborate on it. I do love the change in tone, as Ryan talked about. It's different. You're not trying to prove yourself as much anymore. It's not like pimp questions in an interview, like how would you react to a certain scenario.
Right.
Now that'll sometimes happen depending on how the interview is set up for a particular program. But for mine, I remember it was like Ryan said. It's just getting to know you because you're really seen as a colleague, a future colleague when you're applying for a fellowship. And so practicing. What I did too, a lot of times, and I don't know, Ryan, for you, I'm sure they did, but they would send sort of a schedule and then you would have the list of your interviewees. I would literally Google, I know it sounds kind of borderline stalkerish, but I would Google all of my interviewees. I would look up, where they did their training, what their interests were, what research they've done. And if there's something I can talk to them about it, I would bring that up in the interview. And to them, it just shows that you're interested. Because then it's like, oh, Paul did his homework.
Right.
This guy actually wants to come here. He's not just doing it because we gave him an interview and he's just making sure he matches. Just the same thing reversed. So you show interest. I literally had a stack of them. I would review them the night before, the picture, the name. After doing that, so it's once again twofold. Makes you look good. You come into the interview prepared. They will inherently like you because you showed interest, and then once again you're learning about that program in that same process that you're doing. So I think everyone benefits. I made notes after each one, pros and cons of every single program. Just like in human nature, you're going to forget some things. So when I came down to the rank list, I literally stacked them all in front of me, and my wife and I just went through it, and we just we talked about what we liked about each program, and then that'll assist you later on when we start talking about making your rank list.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, 2 points that I would add to that. I definitely agree, right? Research the program, right? What do they do that's different? What do you like about them? And truly think, what do you like about them? Because you haven't really met them either, right? So you need to know kind of broad strokes why it would be a good fit for you as well, right? Because you have to be honest with yourself. A lot of times we get very desperate in a situation where we just want to match, but sometimes a bad match would be worse than no match. And I think that that's also a little understated in today's hyper-competitive world. Another way that I would practice for interviews, especially if you're going to be virtual, is record yourself. I know it sounds really silly. It's the same thing that you practice for your oral boards. It's the same way. How do you come across a screen? How do you come across when you're talking to someone else and they answer a question? Do you have a natural tendency to chew on your fingernail? Do you have a natural tendency to take your glasses off and rub your eyes? Do you what are the tics that everybody has, right? And for me, I noticed that I would shift a little bit of my head to the left, and it kind of looked like I was almost looking from the side. So I tried to focus on really sitting forward, looking into the camera, maintaining eye contact, which virtually is almost impossible, right? Yeah. But it is just how you convey yourself. So
that's kind of funny because I would do that in front, like my wife. I would kind of practice, and she's super hypercritical. So find somebody that will give you critique about it. What I did, I actually for my laptop, for my camera, I actually put a sticker "Look here," so that I was looking, because when I was doing my interviews, I was looking at the screen to look at the interviewer, but it almost looked like I wasn't even paying him attention.
Exactly.
So then when I would talk, I would look into that. Any other tips for interviews, Ryan?
No.
All right.
So I decided to.
That was pretty
trying to fuck
good.
you
Just
over.
wanted to make sure. Just wanted
Yeah.
to make sure. As much as we talk about preparing for interviews and during the interviews, I think just as equal is follow-up. It's like we talked about before, man. It's just like the dating game. It's like, do I wait 2 days to text her back, or, this and that? So it's always, once again, you don't want to sound overeager. You want to give them their space. But also, too, you want to, be timely with it, too. They pop up and remember, like, oh, yeah, I remember Ryan. Yeah.
Yeah.
How did you go about reaching back out to programs after you interviewed them, your strategies there?
Yeah, I think, in the 21st century, sending an email is definitely the way to go. I think,
Not by Raven?
everybody's-
You don't want to send a Raven,
Well, I didn't have any carrier pigeons left, so I elected against that.
All right, I'll shut up.
The
Sorry.
U.S. Pony Express wasn't able to deliver the mail. So, at any rate, I think that email is the best way to follow up. I think that everybody's in a very busy world. Everybody gets a ton of emails. I don't think you necessarily need to write them a love letter and say, I don't think you need to write them a letter that's 10 pages saying why I love X program. I think that a simple follow-up, just saying, hey, had a really great interview, had really great interactions, really appreciated what you guys and your program was like, and maybe something specific that you wanted to follow-up question or something specific that you liked, some other point to really drive it home.
Yeah, definitely make it customized. Obviously, you don't want to sound like a broken record, like it's something that you send to every program, because a lot of PDs and a lot of administrators will notice that. And you probably noticed that when you received maybe a generic email in the past. So, yeah, like Ryan said, make a personal thing, maybe an interaction you had with one of the faculty or with the PD when you had the interview one-on-one, or if there's, once again, a follow-up question that you wanted to know about that program. I think that's all you need. Just like all surgeons, their time is valuable and they're busy, so brief and straight to the point. When do you usually send the email? I think that's another one. Do you wait a week after? Couple weeks right before match? When's a good time to send an email?
That's a good question, Paul. I think that it's really a spectrum, right? So I think that especially that first email after maybe an interview, maybe you could send it 2, 3, 5 days later. Just a quick note saying what you appreciated, still making it personal. But then maybe following up in another month. Maybe it's in 2 months, right? Depending on how long your match cycle is, you may follow up several times, right? Especially if it's a program you're really interested in, right? They may be following up with you or vice versa. Obviously you want to keep it professional, keep the distance. You don't want to be overbearing or come across too much alacrity or too much eagerness. But I do think that it's important, especially if there are things that you want to know about. And I think that showing earnest interest is a great way to do that, and another reason to email.
Very good. What are your thoughts on second looks?
I was fortunate enough to be invited for a few second looks. I know that that's not a very pervasive practice in interviews nowadays, especially as they're all virtual. But I was very lucky. I really enjoyed the time. It was great to see the program. I think it's critical if you're going into a program that's really long. If you're going into maybe like, let's say you're contemplating a 2-year versus a 1-year, a 3-year versus a 2-year, right? Those are things that may change your mind, right? The location, facilities, the interactions you might see that you might not catch on a virtual interview. I think it's essential. Now, I say essential, but I don't think it's critical. I think that it's not necessarily something that you have to do. It's not something that you if you don't get a second look or nobody necessarily invites you, it's not a kill shot.
No, I think second looks, like you said, a lot of the program directors will also say this is not mandatory. And I take their word for it because they know it's so hard to peel away from time from work.
Absolutely.
So I think it's just literally a benefit to you as the applicant, and once again, a benefit to them because they get to see you. I think I'm still an advocate for in-person interviews. Obviously, I see the utility of virtual because, gosh, I don't think I could have done all the interviews I did if it was on person, just logistically and also financially. But yes, if you are invited or sometimes even ask for a second look, I think a lot of programs will allow it if you ask them for it. That's your benefit. And like Ryan said, if you're going to be living there for an extended period of time, you just want to make sure that it's a decent place and environment for you to stay. And nothing's better than walking through those hospitals, right? I think they're beneficial just as a bonus, but I don't think it really weighs too much on your evaluation. But once again, I'm not in the admission, the evaluation committee for these, but I think it does help.
Yeah, I think that you're right, though, that it doesn't necessarily exclude you from potentially matching somewhere if you don't go. Programs definitely, like I said, they understand that you're basically on your way to becoming a general surgeon, right? So you're an adult with heavy responsibilities running programs, right? You have juniors underneath you, right? You can't just shoot off for a weekend or, come over just to see a program. You can't drive 6 hours and then go back to work the next day kind of thing. So they totally understand, and they know the limitations of a resident, especially trying to get into fellowship, because they've also been through it themselves.
We're almost done, guys. I know you're probably sick and tired of my voice, but not of Ryan's. But a couple more things I want to touch on before we conclude this episode. Ryan, for ranking your programs, what did you take into account? What columns did you put into your Excel to kind of evaluate between you and your family when choosing and ranking?
Yeah, I think that's all going to be really personalized. For me, having a family, having children already, I needed a program that was a little more accessible, for family types of situations. I didn't, for me, that meant no big city, right? That meant that I couldn't really be in New York City, 2 children, and, my wife and a dog and all that. So I think that was kind of, location is definitely part of that. Family unit, whether that's just you, that's you and a significant other, that's you and a pet, what does that mean? And I think the program itself, where am I going to be the best training? The question you have to ask yourself is, what do I want or what do I hope to get out of this fellowship, right? Is that I want to get to a super fellowship? Do I want to get into academic medicine or surgery? Do I want to be set up for a job immediately after? Do I want to use this as a stepping board to something else? And each program is going to offer a different perspective and a different springboard into whatever you may want. For me, I knew, partly from me and partly from my wife, being a little exhausted of me just being a trainee all the time, she wanted me to go somewhere where I'd be ready when I came out. And that's also what I wanted for myself. I wanted to be ready day one out of the gate of fellowship, ready to operate, ready to perform. So for me, that was critical. One of the training paradigms is 2-year versus 3-year in cardiothoracic surgery. I felt personally that some of the 3-year programs kind of spread out the training over a longer period. Now, I can't argue one way or the other of which program's better, but I really like the 2-year programs. I really liked that they were front heavy. They really focused on early operative experience, and that fit me better. Mm-hmm. So I think that those are all things that I put on my, kind of quote unquote Excel sheet to make that decision.
Yeah, same here. Family, geographical location, and then what do you want, mm-hmm. who you want it, what do you picture, and that's sort of and that's once again prepping for your interviews, because that's one thing the PD or your interviewee is going to ask you is like, what do you want to get out of fellowship? And it's not a trick question. It's mm-hmm. what do you want out of it? And I think every trainee during their residency, you notice your strengths and your weaknesses, and I think the fellowship is meant to bring up whatever weaknesses you may or may not have. But then also, once again, if you do have some extracurricular goals, if you want to do academics like you touched on, or if you once again want to be surgeon ready, I think those are huge points, and I'm not going to belabor those. Ryan, I think you nailed it. I think the last part, I think it's just make it fun, but I just want to ask, did you plan anything for match day? Did you guys plan anything fun to do it? Were you going to be actually, I can't remember. Were you working? Were you here?
I was working.
I tried to find you, and you were elusive, but you were probably with your wife or somebody.
No, I was. I remember match day was at noon. I was in a cabbage because I thought realistically, that.
How ironic.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, I just thought that the best way to kind of not sit anxiously waiting an email was to be getting to work. And that's just, obviously kind of my personality. I know some people take the day off, for better, just in case they get good news or bad news, right? Mm-hmm. I wanted to come to work. I wanted to still, complete the task I had at hand. And so I got the email action. I checked it. I think we got out of the case at around 2:00 in the afternoon. So it had been in for about 2 hours, and people were texting me, calling me, and I hadn't even known yet. So, but it was a great feeling, obviously. It's a feeling that I won't ever forget. It's such a relief, such a weight lifted off your shoulders, all that hard work paying off, getting to that next step, right? We're always on this unfortunate treadmill in medicine. Oh, once I get into residency, I'll be happy. Once I get into fellowship, I'll be happy. Once I could become an attending, I'll be happy. But you really have to cherish these moments along the journey, right? Mm-hmm. So that for me was a kind of a seminal moment for just enjoying the journey, right? All that hard work is put in, it's paid off. But yeah, I didn't do anything specific. I came to work.
Amen. it's the journey. It really is the journey that matters, not so much the end result. Yeah, no, that's cool. It's not as inspiring as mine. I kind of already knew because it was the day before my birthday, and I had a close buddy of mine who was getting married and up in Rhode Island. So I just ended up just taking a PTO for the week, and I love the beach, and my wife and I just ended up just hanging out by the water. But I actually didn't get an email at noon, and I thought I had not matched, and I thought I did something wrong. I was like, oh man, I was freaking out, and how I found out was actually the program director from where I matched at texted me at like 12:06, and that's how I found out before I had an acute stroke and heart attack all at once. Like Ryan said, it's an experience you're kind of outer body experience where you did it. You worked so hard for it. There was all that stress leading up to it, not knowing where you're going to be, so much uncertainty. Mm-hmm. And then now it's certain. And Absolutely. And then now you put on, it's like you get ready, you pony up, and you're like, let's take the next task. Let's write the new chapter. And it really just galvanized me. I think that's all I've got for us, unless Ryan's got anything extra, but I want to thank Ryan for taking time out of his busy schedule to sit down with me here today, and all of you folks that took the time to listen. Once again, I appreciate you guys so much, the audience. I think I'm just happy for the next step. And Ryan's been a huge influence in terms of my growth and residency, and also my career. So I want to do a personal thank to him. But was like I said, always been a big brother and always looked out for me and gave me the advice. And because of him and all the others, of course, my mentors and everybody along the way made this happen. And I'm not gonna stop here. I'm gonna continue to bust my tail and help out others that want to do a similar path. And so I hope, once again, if you guys are listening to this, found one or two pearls that kind of would help you in the process, or even just inspire you to kind of go for that. Like I said, you don't have to go to Mass General or Johns Hopkins or Stanford to match at a fellowship that you're choosing. You have what it takes. And with that, everybody stay sterile. Hey, let's tune in for the next one. Ryan, any last words?
No, thank you, Paul. Thank you for having me. Obviously, this is great what you're doing, and always happy to support you in this, your journeys along the way, and very proud of you. So, keep this going, keep it going for the other people. And I do hope that if anybody has any questions or, needs some further inspiration, please reach out to us. We're happy to both share about our stories.
Absolutely. And guys, I'll leave some contact information, not only obviously for me, but definitely for Dr. Huttinger here. So if you guys are interested in cardiothoracic or anything for that matter, he's like I said, he's a great mentor and he'll give you sound advice. All right, everyone, take care. That concludes this episode of the Sterile Room. Thank you for all the contributors, guest appearances, and of course, listeners. If you have any questions or concerns on the topic discussed on this episode, please feel free to reach out. And remember, folks, stay sterile.